Hey, I'm Dr. Serendipity. Thanks for returning to listen to Chapter 6 of Medical Apartheid. This is titled Diagnosis Freedom. This chapter discusses some things such as physical and mental illnesses that people used to attribute to freed Black people, saying how they were inferior and how freedom was actually bad for them. The first story we have is from a Dr. Peter Bryce, who was superintendent of the Alabama Insane Hospital. He'd run this institution since 1860. In 1867, he admitted a former slave of his, who essentially was clearly manic and what we would call today somebody who has bipolar disease. But he had determined that for this particular patient and other Blacks with this condition, that the psychological pressure of caring for himself when he had neither the intelligence nor the judgment was basically just too great, and it forced him into madness. What he literally wrote down for his diagnosis was freedom. Another example of somebody using medicine or science to talk about the inferiority of Blacks was Dr. Josiah Nott, who we've talked about in previous things. He wrote in his paper, The Mulatto, a Hybrid, Probable Extermination of the Two Races if Whites and Blacks are allowed to intermarry. He basically felt that mulattoes, which technically he's talking about me, were infertile, no, weak species, I'm gonna say no, and died at a younger age than did whites, and whose progeny were born feeble. So the problem with this is now that they have these doctors using quote unquote science to then say how Blacks were inferior, which is weird because initially they felt that Blacks were stronger, which is why they justified slavery. But as soon as it came time talking about when slavery is going to end, and now they started coming up with things pointing out how, well, actually slavery is good for them because now they're too weak to be on their own. In fact, even the US Census was used for this purpose. So going back a little further, in 1840, they began counting whites, freed, and enslaved Blacks. This was the first time they had done this. At least according to this documentation, it revealed that free Blacks suffered far worse health, especially far worse mental health, than did enslaved Blacks, who enjoyed low rates of disease and suffered almost no mental illness. It went on to show that there was high rates of miscarriage and infant mortality among free Blacks that in turn were ascribed to Blacks, a higher rate of sexual immorality and sexually transmitted diseases. So from the US Census, this was used as proof that slavery was essential to preserve the health of Blacks. Now I love this next part because in a way it kind of includes my name, and it says that the celebrated census data were deeply flawed, go figure, as was revealed when serendipity